Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. Welcome to another episode of the Deen Show, which is a way of life we try to put out there for everyone to see, helping you understand Islam and Muslims. And if you were just flickering through, watching a TV and you heard Islam and Muslim, don't think anything's about to blow up. We're here to educate you on Islam and Muslims, and thank you for coming to the source. My next guest is going to talk about his experience before Islam, and then why he chose to enter Islam. So I'm sure you're eager to hear his story. Let's bring him out without further delay.
Allah, there's only one God and Muhammad is his messenger. Allah, la ilaha illallah. Allah,
Abdul Rahim Green. How are you? Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure, man.
So, why Islam? You got Christianity, you got Buddhism, this ism, you got things blowing up over here, people associating Islam with everything bad. If you go to a social event, you might not get invited again if you're a Muslim. Why Islam?
Well, if you're the sort of person who cares about stuff like that, then I don't think it would really matter what I say. Because what is important is the truth, not the consequences of accepting the truth. The truth is something that is virtuous in and of itself. And for me, the simple answer to your question is that why Islam? Islam, the reason is because it's the truth. The Quran is the word of God, and Muhammad is the final messenger of God. And this is the way of life that God has ordained for the benefit and for the mercy of all the human beings. And that's why Islam, bro.
Concise, to the point, and it's simple. You want to know that you found out what the truth is and you submitted to it. You didn't care what people are thinking, what they're going to say. You were sincere and you came to it. Is correct?
Yeah, that's about it, really.
Now, I'm sure you've told this story a lot of times, several times. But for the people who've never heard this story, and now they're getting to hear it for the first time, and they wonder, okay, what led you to this before? What kind of life did you lead before? You were a Christian? What did you believe?
Well, first of all, a bit about my background.
Background, yes, sir.
I come from what we would call in England an upper middle class family. England is a lot more of, England has a sort of strata of classes, maybe a lot more than, for example, the United States of America.
Do you have like a butler, a servant, stuff like that?
No, I don't mean like that, but I mean you have the aristocracy, right?
Yeah.
Which is the Queen and the relatives of the Queen and the landed gentry and people like that. So you have the aristocracy, and then you have the upper classes who are, in one way or another connected with the aristocracy. It's not just about wealth, it's also about, it's also, I suppose it's also to do with culture. It's to do with, what you might call breeding, background. So there's a lot of things that come into that. So, for example, my father was a colonial administrator in the British Empire. I was born in Tanzania. He was born in Singapore. My great-grandfather was a High Court judge in Bombay. So we have this colonial background. And anyway, so that's the sort of background that I come from. I was sent to a Roman Catholic monastic boarding school, which is basically a school that was run by monks. My mother, because she's Polish, she wanted me and my brother to be brought up as Catholics. So she sent us to this very well-known boarding school. In UK, we call private schools public schools. Okay, private schools are called public schools, and public schools are called government schools or comprehensives.
Gotcha.
So when someone says I went to public school, it means they actually went to a private school. I'm not quite sure why that is, because when schools started, the only schools were the private schools, or it may be that they were the public schools, but because they're so old and they're so part of the institution, they became the private schools. But Anyway, so I went to this Roman Catholic monastic school. It's a public school, as I said, very well known. And because it was a monastic school run by Benedictine monks, the whole religious ethos of the school was quite strong. So in that sense, I had a quite religious, as you could say, upbringing. You know, we had a lot of, you know, Bible studies, Christian history studies, and so on and so forth. But for me, I had some deep questions about Christianity. You know, amongst the first questions that I ever started thinking in my head was, you know, the Catholics have a prayer called Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And, you know, Hail Mary, Mother of God, blessed art thou amongst women. And I thought, well, how does God have a mother? You know, God's not supposed to have any beginning or end. How can you know, how can God have a mummy?
Yeah.
You know, what is that supposed to mean? You know,
a mummy?
Yeah, a mummy, like as a mum, you know, a ma, you know, mama or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just didn't make any sense. And I thought, you know, as a little kid, I was thinking, well, if God has a mum, then, you know, this mum must be a bigger God than God. Right? I mean, this is how you try, you know, because you don't think that as a kid people are teaching you falsehood. Right? You tend to trust the people around you, and you tend to trust what the society is telling you. And so these questions come to your head, but you trying to find an explanation for it yourself. Because at the end of the day, you know, you trust your environment. That's what you tend to do. But I guess if these questions are often enough, and they're persistent enough, and they're deep enough, and they're confusing enough, you're not going to be able to ignore those questions. And so that's how it was for me. And I have to say, it was a sort of dual thing. It wasn't only me questioning the religious aspect of, for example, you know, what does it mean Mary's the mother of God? Why do I have to go and confess my sins to a priest? Why can't I just ask God to forgive me? You know, what is this Trinity? How can God be one and be three at the same time? I mean, what is that all about? It wasn't only that. It was also the whole materialistic philosophy, the whole idea that, you know, the purpose of life was to make as much money as possible, to have a good job, and, you know, to get a good degree, so you get a good job, so you got a nice car, so you got a nice house, you know, and that was the purpose of life. Was that supposed to be the reason for our existence? It just didn't seem to me that that's all there was to life. There must be something more. And so then I started to begin to look into different religions and different philosophies, and you know, Buddhism, for example. I studied Buddhism for a while. So that was how my sort of search began, through different religions and different ideologies, and, you know, I was trying to find the truth.
Now, did you have, or did you feel you had a connection with Jesus? Now, because you said that you left off to go study Buddhism, but so at that point you were done with Christianity?
It wasn't that simple.
Or you just inquiring? You're inquisitive, and you were out there. You wanted to just compare.
I mean, first of all, Buddhism.
Yeah.
You know, some people would argue that Buddhism is not a religion; it's a philosophy, and you could follow any religion and be a Buddhist at the same time.
Yeah.
Because Buddhism doesn't really deal with whether there's a God or not. At